Hi, it's Mitch. Welcome back to Should Have Bought That. Today we speak with property lawyer Ciara from Haines and Polites. She's a cracking lawyer, knows everything to do about property, obviously how much it costs, when you should engage a solicitor, all the tricks, traps involved, and when you should go and look at a property in the day, the night, when to go at auction. Ciara, welcome to Should Have Bought That. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
You're obviously a lawyer from Haines and Polites.
I'm specialising in property, wills and estates.
What's your preference? Property?
Property,
Yep.
yeah. Love working with first home buyers. Obviously, they're new to purchasing properties, so it's nice to just to guide them along.
First time buyers, obviously you love working with them.
Yes.
Straight off the bat, what are some big tips you have for first home buyers when they are looking at purchasing properties?
I would highly recommend a contract review before heading to an auction or even putting in a private offer.
Yeah. And why is that?
Like, contracts are obviously drafted by the vendor's solicitors, so they're going to favour the vendor. There's a lot of special conditions that need to be considered, or the first home buyers need to know about. Even to getting to know the contract as well. Either if they're going to purchase subject to finance, subject to building and pest reports, they might not be aware of how many days they're actually allowed for them.
Yeah. So it's almost like an education piece around the purchase because a lot of them don't know.
Yeah, and
Straight
these
off the
contracts that they get, especially if there's an owner's corporation, they're probably 400 or 500 pages, which is very, very overwhelming for someone that's never bought a property before. So yeah, we just take that.
When you talk about special conditions, what are some things you've seen in a contract for a first home buyer that you've had to pick up on? Like, is there something common that a vendor puts in or?
Yeah, change of settlement. So when a purchaser has all their ducks in a row and their bank's ready to go, and let's say a settlement's in 60 days, but they're so excited they want to move in 30, we would ask the vendors, solicitors, if our clients can move in earlier or change settlement date. And there's always, like probably 99% of the time, there's a special condition in the contract that there will be a fee for change of settlement, which is probably about $440 payable by the purchaser at settlement. So sneaky, which is an added expense that nobody wants to pay for.
Conditional purchase and an unconditional purchase.
Yes.
What's the difference?
Okay, so if you go to auction and you purchase the property, you have bought unconditional. So there's no conditions in the contract.
You're buying the property.
You're buying the property.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not going to be subject to a building and pest report or subject to you selling your own property
Or
finance, like loan approval dates, nothing. You make a private offer. You put in that private offer as subject to 14 days building and pest report and loan approval date, let's say, of 21 days. Building and pest report comes back, okay, no issues, that's fine. And then you get your loan approval as well. Your lawyer will send an email to the other side, just letting them know that we've ticked off building and pest, client's got loan approval, contract's unconditional, we can proceed to settlement.
In terms of going to auction, what do you advise clients on? Do you look through the contract and go, yeah, pretty comfortable with where it sits? So if you buy unconditionally, then you should be fine. Do you feel like gives first home buyers some sort of confidence?
Yeah, a lot of first home buyers that we deal with are kind of afraid to go to auction because they're like, they might not have pre-approval or they haven't even spoken to a broker yet, and they just so we always recommend them going kind of a private, then the private sale.
Yeah, rather than auction.
Rather than
It's
auction.
unconditional.
Yes, yeah.
It's scary. It's us.
It's
yeah.
scary.
Yeah, absolutely. So your preference is private sale. What other things in that initial phase of meeting, obviously a new client, or at least taking them through the contract and having a look at it prior, are there any other things prior to that stage of purchasing that they should be aware of?
Well, if they do find a property that is going to auction and the vendor isn't taking any private offers, obviously recommend having pre-approval and speaking to a broker about that. Also, building and pest inspections.
Okay. So when should they be done? Prior, obviously?
If it's a private sale, you can purchase subject to a building and pest, and then you have 14 days to complete them.
Yeah.
And then obviously, if it's an auction, prior to an auction, like for the sake of $500-600, you could be buying a lemon.
Exactly right.
So
have you seen some horror stories?
Yes, I've seen some horror stories. Especially with leaks in bathrooms as well. Just agents and vendors going around just covering it up with paint or carpet, and then they purchase at an auction and go into the house, pull back the carpet, and it's just
Yeah.
water damage everywhere.
Yeah. And the cost to repair.
Cost of repairs thousands upon thousands when they could have just paid $500, $600 for a building and pest.
A safeguard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Say they purchase the property and they go under contract. When should a first home buyer insure the property?
We always recommend straight away.
Yep.
Because
why is that?
Because you don't know, like the vendor could, and we've had this scenario before where a vendor's like, "Oh, grand, property's purchased. Why am I paying for insurance anymore?" So then they stop the insurance. The property isn't insured.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
just
is it
that
actually
peace of mind.
Yeah. Right.
Like I know you're obviously paying for a year. What would that be? Max $1,200 for a property. Like for the sake, let's say settlements 60 days or 90 days, like $100 a month for the sake of $200 is just that extra bit of security that the property you've purchased is going to be fine.
Yeah.
If something does
So
happen.
if it burns down, at least you're protected.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's often with this scenario, it's like a couple of $100 here and there. Like it's a building repair, $500, or it's a $200 for insurance. It often protects you down the track. So is that an education piece to the client to say, look, there may be some initial costs
Yes.
early on.
Yeah.
You just have to wear them
Yeah.
if you go into auction.
Yeah, and for first home buyers as well. Will anybody just to know as well that if you go and purchase a property, that's not the only fees you're going to be paying. Like you're paying transfer
Great point.
fees, stamp duty, legal fees, disbursements on top of that. There's
Yeah.
an awful lot more fees than people expect, and they get a shock then once they've purchased the property. So at least if you go to a solicitor or conveyancer, you say, here's the property, here's what I think it's going to sell for, and then we can do the maths and we can give them a ballpark figure. We always round up just so they're not actually getting any
Very good
nice
point.
sneaky surprises at settlement. Yeah.
It's a great point because they often don't know they've got to pay rates or a portion of rates for a certain
Adjustments, and
period
they're
of
like,
time.
what are adjustments? Why do we have to pay?
Why isn't the vendor paying? Yeah, it's a great point. I think if they have that education up front, it makes the process so much smoother. Because a lot of the time, as brokers would speak to someone, they go, I don't need a solicitor. Well, you do. You can't actually purchase a property without it. But it opens up a whole new world that they didn't really know.
Yeah.
And takes on that journey. And I feel like they've got a lot more supported if they engage with a solicitor.
Absolutely.
So for first home buyers who are new to this, how much should you spend on legal fees for a purchase?
It can range. From, you can find a conveyancer that will do it for $800 or up to maybe $2,000.
Okay.
I will say though, you get what you pay for.
So those who are charging $800, with all due respect to them, why are they charging so low?
Yes,
Or
they'll
low
probably
amount, I
do the
should
bare
say?
minimum.
Like potentially not looking over the contracts in detail?
Yeah, no, I don't like that. That fee wouldn't include contract reviews.
Okay, good to know.
Definitely not.
Yeah, so it's good to actually go and make sure you're paying
and
reasonable price.
Yeah, and just like when they give you a quote, obviously you get a quote before. You can just ring a law firm and just ask
And they'll
them.
quote you on that.
Yeah, they'll ask you a few questions. Disbursements as well is also a big one. So like prior to settlement, we draft statement of adjustments. So obviously the council rates, water rates, and that are split between the purchaser and vendor. We need to order updated certificates that aren't in the contract, just to make sure that all fees are paid for. And that they range. If there's an OC, like owners corporation certificates alone these days are probably between 170 to 190. And if you're buying like a multi-story or a unit in a multi-story and there's 3 OCs, that's $600.
So it adds up.
If you're just purchasing a property, like just a standalone house, you're probably looking about $300 for disbursements and then legal fees on top of that. Definitely worth shopping around in this market.
So obviously when you're buying a house, there's different stages, right? There's obviously the initial phase where you go, I want to buy, and then you obviously go through finance, and then you put in an offer, it gets accepted, and then finance gets accepted, then you go to settlement. Is generally the range of how a process works. What stage of that process should you engage with a solicitor?
The minute you start thinking about buying a property, you start ringing around for lawyers or ask for recommendations on a conveyancer or a lawyer, because the minute you start looking at a property, the agent's going to send you what's called a Section 32 or a vendor statement, and that's what you need to get looked over, that including the contract.
Something I think that gets overlooked as well is if you do get that looked over and it's all okay, you can actually move quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it actually gives you, as a buyer, and you've got your finance in order, and you've engaged a solicitor, lawyer, you've got the contract looked over, you're actually in a much better position to I guess, purchase with confidence too.
Especially with private offers as well, because an agent's going to want to sell the property as well. And one thing that first home buyers, or well, a lot of purchasers don't know is if you're making a private offer, you can change or add special conditions in yourself. You can ask your lawyer to draft up some. We had, like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, acting for a purchaser, and he was also selling his property. So we put in a condition that his purchase would go unconditional once his sale went unconditional.
So you can have a bit of flexibility in terms of
exactly,
suggesting
and
conditions.
special conditions can be deleted as well, because a lot of the time vendors don't actually know what's in their contracts, and because when I was speaking earlier on about changing settlement date and it's $440, like, that's not going to the vendor, that's going straight into the solicitor's pocket.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something to be aware of. So you can remove special conditions.
Have you had any sort of horror stories that you've seen? We're going to talk about some good stories too, but any really perfect examples of, when someone's going to auction, what they did prior that sort of safeguarded them potentially?
We had clients come to us that purchased at an auction. They arrived, or they called the office, sent us the contract signed, sealed. So there was nothing we could do but obviously act for them. They didn't get the contract reviewed prior, and there was special levies raised for roof repairs, which they were going to be liable for, because these special levies were struck after the auction. I think it was probably about 10 grand, and they were first home buyers.
Brutal. And generally, playing in the first home buyer space, there's not too much room to move.
No.
Haven't got oodles of cash sitting in the bank. You're dealing with a very finite, space. Tough if that's the amount they have to cop. So as a perfect example,
and having to tell them as well just wasn't nice. And the first thing they said was, should have got it reviewed. And there's so many solicitors and conveyancers out there that will review contracts for free.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Part of our costs include 2 contract reviews.
Okay, good to know. So people think, I'm going to speak to a lawyer, it's going to cost me straight away.
Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, there's other lawyers out there that will charge $300-400 for contract reviews, but
even that could be worth its weight in gold. Anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, if they had to pay $500 for that contract review, it would have saved them $9,500.
Yeah, exactly right. That's a perfect scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
A good story. We spoke off air previously about this purchase next to an abattoir. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Just what, like, with purchasers and just common things that they should be aware of is, like, if they're purchasing a property, obviously they're getting excited. They're like, oh my God, this house or this apartment, beautiful garden, blah, blah, blah. But, like, have a walk around the neighborhood. I had a client last year come to us for a contract review. She loved the property. She was like, I don't even need a review. I'm purchasing it. It's auction. I have pre-approval. It's auction on Saturday. And I looked at the address and I'm like, oh no. I'm like, so 2 weeks prior to that, I was playing golf in Medway. And I could only actually get 9 holes played because of the smell from the abattoir across the road from the golf club. And the apartment was on the same side as the golf club. So I called the client, explained to her, and she was like, it'll be fine, blah, blah, blah. She obviously loved this property so much. So the auction was at 12 o'clock on the Saturday. I told her to go up on the Friday evening or on the Saturday morning, have a little walk around and just, have a little smell of the neighborhood. She sent me a text then at 11:30 that she was on her way home, that she couldn't buy that property because she wasn't able to even open her doors or windows because the smell.
A good news story for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But a great point to make sure you go and check out the property. Yeah. Often, if you're first time buyer, sight unseen can be a little bit risky. That's a great scenario. And you probably saved her a lot of money, time, and her own sanity.
All for playing golf in Medway.
I know. So golf does have its benefits. Yeah, absolutely. Once a property goes unconditional, so they bought the property and their loan documents are out for finance and they're heading towards settlement, what involvement do you have in that time period? Do you want to talk us through the process?
Well, in terms of like Haines and Polites and the way we work, we are there with the client from contract reviews up until settlement and after. If there's any issues that arise after settlement, we're on the phone. We just liaise with the banks. As you know, we've worked together on a few settlements as well.
Yep.
Settlements completed on a electronic platform called PEXA. So ourselves, the vendors, lawyers, banks, all work within that workspace and just work our way towards settlement. The clients will sign loan docs, mortgage will be created, and then we'll complete statement of adjustments. So that's when the council rates and water are
Those fees we
divided.
spoke about.
Yeah,
Yep.
divided.
Yep.
Between the purchaser and the vendors. And then on the day of, like about a week prior to settlement, we'll have financial figures, so we know what money is needed and where it needs to be, either in their offset account for excess funds or in our trust account. Then in the day of settlement, like the clients could be lying on a beach somewhere. Like they don't have to be anywhere.
Yeah.
Don't have to attend. It's all done online. It takes about 40 minutes. Yeah, and like settlement's probably booked in maybe a couple of days prior. So you'll have a certain time. So let's say it's at 2:00. Settlement's done at 2:45. They can go pick up the keys.
Brilliant. Do you want to, this is getting quite technical.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the trust account and transferring into a trust account?
Yes.
And then obviously the lender that they have into their shortfall account, which is a bank account.
So that's all done when the loan documents are being drawn up and signed. There'll be, on most of the loan documents that I've seen, there's a little tick a box of
correct.
if for excess funds, let's say they need 100 grand, either that's going to be put into your lawyer's trust account or into the offset account. We always recommend putting into the offset account. The horror stories we hear of like purchasers, especially first home buyers, because it's a lot of money to transfer and they're one digit off and that money is just floating around somewhere. Now, there was a buyer's advocate that we worked with before, and they used a different lawyer and the trust account details, so their emails were hacked and the first home buyers had to send 60 grand to their trust account, but it went overseas somewhere. So vendors just weren't taking no for an answer on settlement, and the purchasers had to come up with an extra 60 grand while the banks worked with to try get the other 60 grand back, and the vendors charged penalty interest for delayed settlement.
So moral of the story, transfer into your bank account.
What
the loan document say, it's probably a broker point, to be honest, is make sure there's a bank account opened where they can transfer into in preparation for settlement.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
it. It's not obviously a trust account.
Yeah.
Transfers do work. But
especially like even with deposits as well, like there needs to be two forms. You need to ring the real estate agent and confirm their trust account details over the phone and then follow it up with an email or vice versa. Same with us. Even once we send trust account details to a client, we'll call them.
It's a good point. Something that a lot of purchasers don't really know, or they get a little bit weary of going, "Oh, do I need to transfer to the solicitor?" Well,
exactly.
To the agent. So you get that confusion. So yeah, it's good to know that can work, but it also is easier if it's a bank account
absolutely.
As well. Yeah, absolutely. Post settlement, what's your touch like with clients? Do you regularly keep in touch? Do you...
So obviously, well, that's where the kind of wills and estates come in then as well, because they've purchased new properties. So we'll follow them up and we'll just make sure they have wills, and if they do have wills, we'll just make sure that they're updated to show that the property's there as well. Straight after settlement, if we're acting for the purchasers, we send what's called a notice of acquisition to council, water, and if there's an owners corporation as well, just to let them authorities know that our clients are the new owners.
Brilliant. In terms of body corporate, is there anything different you should look out for when you purchase an apartment off a plan, or in a large complex? Obviously, living in Melbourne, there's a lot of apartments around. Is there anything different from purchasing an apartment that clients should look for, or a house?
Well, when it comes to owners corporations, in terms of insurance, the building's insured with like strata insurance. So purchaser would just need just contents insurance for their property. Contract reviews, especially when there's an owners corporation, because there's bound to be a special levy somewhere, or an upcoming special levy that's not due until way after settlement. Something to be aware of. Or if there's issues with, could be issues with the car parks or the pool, or and even Something to consider as well if you're purchasing a property is if you can afford owners corporation fees, because some of the fees, reviewed a contract a couple of weeks ago, and the owners corporation fees for the year were about 20 grand.
That is nuts.
Yeah.
That is nuts.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Yeah, it's a good point. Something that you have to really be mindful of, especially when apartments are great. But if there's high body corporate, that usually comes with the pool and tennis court and that kind of arrangement, full service. It can be a big cost. So it's a great point. Absolutely. Ciara, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And for taking us through, what first home buyers need to look for, which is really crucial, and mistakes that can be made. So hopefully more people can be informed later on. Thanks for listening to Ciara's episode. There's some great tips about when you should engage a solicitor, how much it costs, and making sure you have your contract looked over before you even get started with property purchasing. Thanks for listening. See you next time.